Before we get started, make sure to subscribe to the channel and like this video. That way, you'll always stay connected to our stories and never miss the next adventure. Here's the thing about the galaxy's most advanced civilizations. They built stations that could withstand supernovas, engineered artificial gravity that could crush diamonds into neutron paste and cracked faster than light travel before most species discovered fire. But ask them to handle a scared animal? Suddenly, everyone's got somewhere else to be. The research station on Vexthul, a ice moon that made Antarctica look like a beach resort, hummed with the kind of sterile efficiency that screamed, "Designed by committee." Everything was smooth metal and pulsing lights, all very impressive, very cutting edge. Very much not designed for actual living creatures, predator or otherwise. But that's what you get when herbivores design predator research facilities. A whole lot of theory, not much practical sense. Florence stood in the cargo bay, watching the transport shuttles ramp lower with a hydraulic hiss that echoed off the walls. Steam rolled out like something from a budget horror film, because of course the temperature differential had to be dramatic. She'd been on Vexthul for 8 months now, and the theatrical environmental effects still made her want to laugh. "The specimen container is secure, yes? Yes, confirm, secure." Ulix's voice crackled through the comm system, high-pitched and warbling. The station commander was currently watching from the safety of the command center, which was his preferred location whenever anything remotely dangerous happened, which on a predator research station was basically always. Florence tapped her comm badge. "Container looks intact, Ulix. Relax." "Relax?" She says, "Relax." Ulix's translation matrix struggled with what might have been a laugh, or possibly a sound of impending cardiac arrest. Easy for human to say. Human is apex predator. Human does not have evolutionary trauma from being prey. That was the thing about working with aliens from prey species backgrounds. Everything was evolutionary trauma. Loud noises? Evolutionary trauma? Unexpected movements? Evolutionary trauma? A slightly aggressive-looking vegetable in the commissary? You guessed it. Evolutionary trauma. The transport crew, 3 whim species workers in environmental suits, were already backing away from the container they'd just unloaded. It was a standard specimen transport unit, about the size of a small car, with reinforced walls and enough warning labels to wallpaper a house. Through the semi-transparent panels, something moved. Something big. Well, big-ish. Okay, it was probably the size of a large dog, but when you're a species that evolved running from things with teeth, size is relative. "Juvenile qualith, as ordered," one of the transport workers said, their voice translator making them sound bored despite their body language screaming, "I want to be literally anywhere else." Clearance codes transmitted. "We're leaving now. Immediately now. Already gone now." They weren't kidding. The shuttle ramp was closing before. Florence could even acknowledge, the whole crew apparently on a tight schedule, that involved not being near predators for 1 nanosecond longer than legally required. Florence approached the container, her boots clicking on the metal floor. Inside, she could make out crystalline scales that caught the light like a disco ball designed by evolution. Multiple limbs ending in claws that definitely meant business, and eyes. Oh, those eyes, that glowed with an intelligence that was frankly unsettling. "Bokthu, you getting biometric readings?" Florence asked. Yes, readings obtained." The medical officer's buzzing voice came through the comm. Bokthu was insectoid, which theoretically meant they had fewer prey species hang-ups, but apparently their entire civilization had decided that discretion was the better part of valor. Specimen appears healthy. Elevated stress hormones. Recommend extreme caution. Recommend more caution than that. Recommend possibly reconsidering career choices. Noted, Florence said, biting back a grin. She'd studied the Colith species for months before this specimen arrived. Apex predators from a high-gravity world. Pack hunters with problem-solving intelligence that rivaled Earth's dolphins. Dangerous? Absolutely. But also behaviorally predictable if you understood pack dynamics and juvenile development. The container's control panel blinked green. Biometric scan complete. Internal atmosphere stable. The creature inside was cleared for release into the station's predator habitat wing. All Florence had to do was transfer it from the container to the habitat enclosure, a distance of maybe 20 meters down a reinforced corridor. Simple. Except, warning, warning. Wim's voice suddenly cut through the calm. Her species' natural anxiety cranked up to 11. Container integrity compromised. Repeat, container integrity compromised. Seal breach detected. Florence's head snapped toward the container. Sure enough, one of the panel seals was hissing, a thin line of frost forming where the temperature differential hit atmosphere. Must have been damaged during transport, the seals failing now that the internal pressure was equalizing. How bad? Florence asked, already knowing the answer wouldn't be good. Catastrophic failure imminent. Estimate 30 seconds before full breach. And that's when the alarms started. Not just any alarms. The full station emergency protocol, complete with flashing lights and a warning klaxon that sounded like a mechanical whale having an existential crisis. Subtle, it was not. All personnel evacuate cargo bay immediately. Olix's voice had gone up another octave, which Florence hadn't thought was physically possible. Predator containment failure. Evacuate, evacuate, evacuate. Florence heard the distinctive sound of blast doors sealing throughout the station, the automatic response to any containment breach, which meant everyone was now safely locked away in their designated panic rooms, leaving her alone in the cargo bay with a container that was about to pop open like the galaxy's worst surprise party. "Olix, I'm still in here," Florence said calmly. "Yes, aware of this. Get out. The doors are sealed. Override code. Use override code. Don't have it. You sealed me in." Silence on the comm. Then, oh no. The container gave a metallic groan. The seal breach had spread, panels starting to separate. Through the widening gap, Florence could see movement, scales shifting, muscles bunching. "Accessing security override now." Olix sounded like he was one stress hormone away from molting. 15 seconds. Hold on." The container's front panel fell off with a crash that echoed through the cargo bay. And out stepped the Qualith cub. It was, objectively speaking, beautiful in that way that apex predators tend to be. All efficient design and lethal grace. 6 legs moved in perfect coordination, each step careful. Testing. The crystalline scales weren't just for show. They were sensory organs, refracting light in ways that probably gave it a 360-degree field of awareness. The head, somewhere between reptilian and feline, swiveled, taking in its new environment. Those glowing eyes fixed on Florence. "Door opening in 10 seconds, Olix announced. "Run! Run now!" But Florence didn't run. Running triggered chase instinct. Running said prey. And the absolute last thing you wanted to do around a predator, especially a young one, still learning behavioral boundaries, was act like prey. The cub took a step toward her. Another. It was curious, head tilting, scales shimmering as it processed sensory data, trying to figure out what this strange 2-legged thing was. Florence stood perfectly still. Relaxed posture, no direct eye contact, breathing steady. Non-threatening, but not submissive. Just there. The cub crept closer, each movement cautious. It was scared, Florence realized, transported across space, shoved in a container, now in a strange place with weird smells and sounds. Of course it was scared. When it got within a meter, it did what scared juvenile predators do. It tested boundaries. The bite wasn't meant to seriously injure, more of an exploratory chomp, the way a puppy might mouth something to understand it. But those jaws clamped down on Florence's boot with enough force that she felt the pressure through the reinforced material. Several things happened at once. The alarms got louder, if that was possible. Ullix made a sound that the translator gave up trying to interpret, settling for distressed prey vocalization. And Florence, without really thinking about it, did what she'd done 1,000 times with aggressive animals back on Earth. She pointed her finger directly at the cub's face, locked eyes with it, and in a voice that carried every ounce of calm, commanding authority she possessed, said, "No." Not loud, not angry, just absolute. The cub froze, released her boot. And then, and this was the part that would later break the galactic internet, it sat down, just plopped its haunches on the floor, all 6 legs folding in that universal posture of, okay, I'm being good now. And it whined, a high-pitched, almost plaintive sound that was the exact opposite of what an apex predator should sound like. The kind of sound that said, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean it, please don't be mad." Florence lowered her finger slowly, keeping eye contact. The cub's head drooped. Ears, or whatever those frilled sensory appendages were, flattening against its skull. Submissive posture. Juvenile deference to authority figure. Textbook behavior. The blast door finally opened with a hiss. Ullix's voice came through the comm, shaky and small. "Florence, are you... how?" Florence glanced up at the security camera in the corner of the cargo bay, knowing that every member of the crew was watching this footage right now. "It's a juvenile," she said simply. Young pack predators respond to confident authority figures. Basic animal behavior. She looked back at the cub, which was still sitting, still waiting for approval or direction, or something to tell it what to do next. "Come on," Florence said, her voice softer now. She gestured toward the habitat corridor. "Let's get you somewhere more comfortable." The cub stood, hesitantly, like it wasn't sure if it was allowed, and followed her. Just walked right along beside her, occasionally glancing up as if to make sure it was doing the right thing. Behind them, the cargo bay remained empty, except for the broken container, and the complete silence on the comm system. Florence led the cub down the corridor to the habitat enclosure, a much larger, more enriched environment than the transport container. When they reached the entrance, she cycled the door open. "In you go," she said, gesturing. The cub looked at the habitat, then at Florence, then back at the habitat. It stepped inside, turned around, and sat down again, watching her with those glowing eyes. Florence closed the enclosure door, locked it, and pulled up the habitat monitoring systems. Everything green. The cub was already moving around, sniffing things, starting to explore. Her comm crackled to life. "Florence?" Ullix's voice was barely above a whisper. "What in the name of every peaceful grazer in the galaxy did we just witness?" Florence pulled off her boot, checking the bite marks. Not even a scratch on the reinforced material, thankfully. "I told you. Basic animal behavior. It's a baby. Babies respond to confident adults, even across species. That is not basic anything. That was..." Ullix seemed to be struggling with both language and concept. "We have footage, the whole thing. WIM already transmitted it to the Galactic Council as part of the incident report." Oh no. Ulix, it's really not that. You pointed. It sat. You used a finger gesture, and your voice and an apex predator sat down and whined. Ulix's voice was climbing back up the register scale. Do you understand what this looks like? Do you comprehend the implications? Florence sighed, sitting down on a nearby cargo crate. It looks like someone who understands animal behavior, successfully managing a scared juvenile predator. It looks like a human dominated an apex predator through sheer force of will. That's not. The footage is already spreading through Galnet. You are going to be famous. Humans are going to be more famous, more terrifying, more... Ulix paused. We might get more funding for the station. Florence blinked. Wait, what? If human methods prove this effective, Galactic Council will want to study this. Document techniques. You realize what this means for xenobiological research? For predator rehabilitation programs? For... He was getting excited now, the fear temporarily overridden by bureaucratic opportunism. We could become the premier facility in the sector. In the habitat enclosure, the Qualith cub had found a raised platform and was curled up on it, watching the station activity through the transparent wall. It looked, Florence thought, like it was settling in just fine. Her comm buzzed with an incoming message notification. Then another. Then 5 more. Then 20. Florence, you are receiving communication requests from multiple news networks, research institutions, and... Wim's voice cut in, sounding odd. 3 different military organizations want to know if you offer training seminars. Florence put her head in her hands. It was going to be a long day. In the command center, Ulix pulled up the security footage again, watching the moment where Florence pointed and the cub sat. He replayed it 6 times, each viewing making him more certain of one thing. Humans were either the bravest or the craziest species in the galaxy. Possibly both. Definitely both. And they just hired one to work on a station full of the galaxy's most dangerous predators. What could possibly go wrong? The footage went viral in under 6 hours. Not just popular. Viral in that special way that breaks galactic communication networks and spawns 1,000 conspiracy theories before lunch. Within a day, Florence's finger point had been remixed, analyzed, slowed down, sped up, and turned into approximately 900 memes. Her favorite so far was the one where someone had edited in dramatic orchestral music and lens flares. Her least favorite was the one claiming she'd used ancient human pheromone warfare techniques passed down from prehistoric alpha hunters. I don't even know what that means, Florence said, staring at her datapad, while the Qualith cub, who she'd started mentally calling the kid, because naming research specimens was unprofessional, but thinking of them as anonymous subjects was depressing, played with an enrichment toy in its habitat. It means you are galaxy famous, Wim said, her chittering laugh making the translator sound like malfunctioning machinery. 23 million views, climbing every minute. Also, someone made a ballad about you. It has 4 verses. A ballad? Very dramatic. Much rhyming. Your name paired with Predator Whisperer and Apex Tamer, and, let me check my notes, she who makes the killers kneel. Florence groaned. I'm a xenobiologist. I understand animal behavior. That's literally my job. Yes, but you are human xenobiologist, Wim said, as if this explained everything. And in a way, it did. Humans had a reputation in the galactic community, the kind of reputation that made people either very curious or very nervous, depending on their species' position in the food chain. The thing was, humans occupied this weird evolutionary niche that most of the galaxy found baffling. Not the biggest, not the strongest, not the fastest, but persistent, adaptable. And with this unsettling ability to look at something that should trigger every survival instinct and go, what if I tried to understand it instead of running away? Most species picked a lane: predator or prey, fight or flight, eat or be eaten. Humans somehow ended up in all the lanes at once, and the rest of the galaxy couldn't figure out if that was brilliant or insane. The kid pressed its face against the habitat wall, watching Florence with those glowing eyes. When she glanced over, it made a small chirping sound, a contact call, according to the behavioral database. Basically, "Hey, I see you. You still there?" Florence chirped back, imitating the sound. The kid's scales shimmered in what the sensors interpreted as pleasure response. "See?" Florence gestured at the habitat. "It's not magic. It's just learning to associate me with safety and routine. Basic bonding behavior. You chirp at apex predator. Apex predator chirps back. This is somehow your argument for normal behavior?" Wim's antennae quivered in what might have been amusement or existential confusion. "Florence, I have worked with you for 8 months. You are least normal human, which means you are least normal being in galaxy." Before Florence could defend her perfectly reasonable scientific methodology, Ulix's voice burst through the station's comm system. "Attention, all personnel. We have incoming transport. Galactic Council Inspection Team arriving in 30 minutes. Repeat, Council Inspection Team. Everyone look professional. Act professional. Be professional." A pause. "Florence, please be available for questions. Many questions. Possibly all the questions." Florence and Wim exchanged glances. "Inspection team doesn't just show up," Wim said slowly. "Inspection team schedules. Inspection team gives advance notice. Inspection team sends forms in triplicate." "Unless something made them decide to show up unannounced," Florence finished. She looked at her datapad, still displaying the viral footage. Oh no. Oh yes. 30 minutes later, Florence stood in the station's receiving bay, trying to look like someone who hadn't just accidentally become the galaxy's most famous xenobiologist through what amounted to telling an animal no in a firm voice. The inspection team's shuttle docked with the kind of precise efficiency that screamed, "Government officials." The airlock cycled, the door opened, and out stepped 3 beings who managed to make simply walking look like a formal censure. The leader was tall, well, tallish, height being relative, with the flowing robes and excessive jewelry that marked someone who spent more time in council chambers than anywhere actually useful. His species name was unpronounceable by human vocal cords, but the translator badge identified him as Kumanth, Senior Inspector of Xenobiological Research Facilities. He looked at Florence the way someone might look at an unexploded bomb. "You are the human," he said, not a question, an accusation. "I'm a human," Florence corrected. "There's like 20 billion of us. I'm Florence, staff xenobiologist." Kumanth's nostril equivalents flared. "The human from the footage, the one who—" He paused, as if the words physically pained him, "dominated a Kolith juvenile through unknown means." "I didn't dominate anything. I used basic animal behavioral principles to—" "You pointed." Kumanth actually pointed his own appendage, mimicking the gesture. And it obeyed. Immediately. Submissively. An apex predator showed deference to a gesture. "It's a baby," Florence said, her patience already wearing thin. "Babies across most species respond to confident authority figures. The kid was scared, testing boundaries, and I set a clear limit. That's not mysterious. That's just how juvenile social development works." "The kid?" Kumanth looked horrified. You have named the specimen? No, I just... Look, can we skip to the part where you tell me why you're actually here? Because I'm pretty sure you didn't cross 3 sectors just to critique my behavioral management techniques. One of the other inspectors, shorter, with a nervous energy that suggested a prey species background, pulled out a data tablet. The Galactic Council has received 58 formal inquiries about human capabilities in predator management. 15 research institutions want to hire humans immediately. 3 governments have requested information about human predator control methods for military applications. Military applications, of course. And there are concerns, Kuamanth added, his voice taking on that particular tone that bureaucrats use when they're about to make your life difficult. About safety protocols. Specifically, whether humans represent a containment risk on facilities such as this. Florence felt her jaw tighten. A containment risk? You must understand the optics. Humans are already considered unpredictable. Now footage shows a human exercising dominance over an apex predator with minimal effort. This raises questions about human behavioral control, human predator instincts, human ability to do our jobs competently? Florence cut in. Yeah, I can see how that would be threatening. Before Kuamanth could respond, and, oh, he was winding up for a response, a new voice echoed across the receiving bay. The human thinks she is predator controller? This I must see. Everyone turned. The newcomer was built like a tank that had been taught to walk upright. Heavy armor plating, natural, not worn, covering corded muscle that suggested a species that had fought its way to the top of its food chain and enjoyed every second of it. The translator identified the language as Falnix dialect, which meant warrior caste from one of the Rim cultures. The being itself, Falnix apparently, matching name to species designation, stood nearly 2.5 meters tall, with facial features that were probably handsome by his species' standards, but looked to Florence like someone had designed a face specifically for headbutting things. You are the human from the footage, Falnix said, striding forward with the confidence of someone who'd never lost a fight and wasn't about to start now. The one who made the predator submit. I'm the human who understands animal behavior? Yes. Falnix laughed, a booming sound that made several of the inspection team flinch. Animal behavior. She says, animal behavior. He looked at Kuamanth. This is the one you fear? This small thing? I don't fear, Kuamanth started. You fear, Falnix said cheerfully. Your species always fears, is why you hide behind desks and regulations. He turned back to Florence. But I do not fear. I am warrior. I hunt. I fight. I test myself against worthy opponents. Good for you, Florence said. I'm a scientist. I study, I research, I write papers that get cited in academic journals. Different career paths. I have come to test myself against human, Falnix announced, as if Florence hadn't spoken. To see if humans are truly as dangerous as rumors say. If you can dominate predators, perhaps you can challenge warrior. Florence looked at Ullix, who had appeared in the receiving bay and was now making a series of hand gestures that the translator interpreted as, "Please do not anger the large warrior. We need this facility intact." I'm not going to fight you, Florence said slowly. Not fight. Test. Contest. Battle of skills. Still no. You refuse challenge? This is cowardice. And here was the thing about Florence. She'd spent most of her life dealing with academic politics, grant committees, and peer review. She'd been talked down to, dismissed, and underestimated by people who thought xenobiologist meant plays with alien puppies all day. She'd developed a very specific tolerance for nonsense. which is to say, very little. "It's not cowardice," Florence said, her voice dropping into that same calm, absolute tone she'd used with the kid. "It's common sense. I'm not going to participate in some ego-measuring contest because you need to prove something about your warrior culture. I have actual work to do." Falnix's face did something complicated. The translator struggled for a moment, then settled on surprised respect, mixed with persistent aggression. "You speak with confidence, like alpha, like pack leader." "I speak like someone who has limited patience for interruptions. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a juvenile qualeth that needs its afternoon enrichment session." Florence turned to walk away, and that's when the kid made its presence known. The habitat wing was visible from the receiving bay through a series of windows, part of the station's design to let crew monitor the specimens. And the kid, who'd apparently been watching the whole exchange, chose that exact moment to notice Florence walking away. It pressed against the habitat wall and let out a call. Not aggressive, not distressed, just that contact call again, that "Hey, where are you going?" sound. Florence stopped, looked through the window, and chirped back. The kid's scales shimmered. It paced along the wall, following her position. The entire receiving bay went silent. "She speaks predator language," someone whispered. "That's not," Florence started. "The predator recognizes her as pack," another voice added. "I just learned its contact call from the behavioral database. It seeks her approval. It wants her attention. She has bonded with an apex predator in less than 1-day cycle." Florence looked at the kid, who was now sitting by the window, head tilted in that universal "are we doing something" posture. She looked at the assembled aliens, all of whom were staring at her like she'd just casually mentioned she could breathe in vacuum. She looked at her datapad, which was now showing 40 new communication requests. "I'm going to go do my job," Florence said finally. "You're all welcome to watch from the observation deck. It's literally just feeding time and play enrichment. Very boring. Very normal." She walked toward the habitat wing, and behind her, she heard Falnix say, "I wish to observe the human at her work." Of course he did. The observation deck overlooked the habitat wing, with reinforced transparent aluminum walls that could withstand pretty much anything short of a direct hit from ship weapons. Which was good, because the last thing anyone needed was predators mixing with the general population. Florence entered the habitat through a sealed access corridor. Proper safety protocols, despite what everyone seemed to think. And the kid immediately bounded over. All 6 legs moving in that puppyish coordination that somehow looked adorable despite the claws and crystalline scales and teeth. "Hey, kid," Florence said, pulling out a container of the nutritional supplement that approximated qualeth dietary needs. "Hungry?" the kid chirped, scales shimmering. Above, in the observation deck, she could hear the murmur of voices. The inspection team, Falnix, and now what sounded like half the station crew who'd abandoned their posts to watch. Great. An audience. Florence went through the feeding routine, not just handing over food, but making the kid work for it. Problem-solving enrichment, building intelligence, maintaining healthy behaviors. She hid portions around the habitat, created simple puzzles, encouraged natural foraging instincts. The kid loved it. Pounced on hidden food, solved puzzles with growing confidence, occasionally bringing prizes back to Florence like, "Look what I found." "She trains it," she heard Falnix say, "like warrior trains apprentice." "She teaches it to hunt," another voice added. "It's enrichment," Florence called up, not bothering to hide her exasperation. "It's keeping the kid mentally stimulated and physically active." This is standard care for intelligent predators. After feeding came playtime. Florence had brought in some toys, indestructible ones, rated for predator use, and the kid went nuts for a particular ball that made sounds when moved. Watching an apex predator play with a ball shouldn't be as entertaining as it was, but there was something universally hilarious about the kid pouncing, missing, tumbling, getting back up, and trying again with undiminished enthusiasm. "The predator plays," Quilmanth said, his voice carrying the tone of someone whose worldview was actively being rearranged. "All juvenile mammals play," Florence said, sitting down as the kid brought the ball back for another throw. "It develops motor skills, practices hunting behaviors in safe contexts, and builds social bonds. This is basic biology." She threw the ball. The kid chased it, scales flashing in the habitat lights. From the observation deck, silence. The kind of silence that meant everyone was thinking very hard about things they'd thought they understood. Florence smiled. Maybe, just maybe, this could actually be educational. Then the kid brought the ball back, dropped it at her feet, and sat down, looking up at her with those glowing eyes, waiting for approval, waiting for the next throw, like a very deadly, very alien dog. "Good kid," Florence said, scratching behind the sensory ridges. The kid leaned into the touch, making a sound that the translator gave up on, settling for contentment vocalization. In the observation deck, Falnix watched the human sitting on the floor of a predator habitat, playing with a creature that could tear her apart in seconds if it chose. The creature did not choose. The creature wanted to play ball. "Interesting," Falnix said quietly. "Very interesting indeed." The alarms started in the dead hours of station night, which was the universe's way of saying that nothing good ever happens when most people are asleep. Florence jerked awake in her quarters, the emergency klaxon drilling into her skull like an angry wasp, made of pure sound. Her datapad lit up with alerts, each one more urgent than the last. Containment breach in Habitat Wing 3. Adult Qualeth specimen, loose. All personnel ordered to shelter in place. Security protocols engaged. She was moving before her brain fully processed the words, grabbing her jacket and comm unit. Her quarters were in the residential section, 3 corridors away from the Habitat Wing. Too far. Way too far. "Ulix, status," she barked into the comm. "Adult Qualith broke containment." Ulix's voice was already at maximum panic frequency. "Seals failed. Habitat door compromised. It's in the main corridor network." The adult. They'd received an adult specimen 2 weeks ago, kept it in a separate habitat from the kid for obvious reasons. Mature Qualith were solitary hunters, aggressive, territorial. Not babies who played with balls and made contact calls. This was the real deal. How did the seals fail? Florence was already running, checking her datapad for the creature's last known location. Habitat Wing, moving toward... Oh no. Moving toward the residential section. Unknown! Maybe stress fracture, maybe installation defect, maybe the universe hates us. Ulix sounded like he was hyperventilating. "It's hunting. Florence, it's actively hunting. Sensors show predatory behavior patterns." Florence's blood went cold. "Where's the crew?" Sheltering. Everyone locked down except... A pause that lasted too long. Quilmanth and his team were in the archives when the breach happened. They're sealed in. But that section won't hold long. The doors weren't designed for prolonged predator assault. What about Falnix? He insisted on staying in guest quarters near the Habitat Wing, said he wanted to be close to the action. He got his wish. The station's layout flashed through Florence's mind. The archives were 2 levels down, connected to the main corridor network by ventilation shafts that a determined Qualeth could absolutely navigate. The guest quarters were exposed, minimal reinforcement, and the kid's habitat was right in the adult's path. "Alex, I need you to patch me into all security cameras and get me a direct line to Falnix." "What are you going to do?" "Something stupid, probably." The comm crackled. Then Falnix's voice came through, remarkably calm for someone potentially about to become a midnight snack. "Human Florence, I hear the Predator." "Where are you?" "Guest quarters. Corridor Junction 12. The creature is—" A pause. "Close. I can hear it breathing through the walls." Florence checked her datapad. The adult's heat signature showed it circling that exact section. Hunting patterns. Testing doors. Looking for entry points. "Stay quiet. Don't move. Calleth hunt by movement and sound. I am warrior. I do not hide. You're a warrior who's about to get killed by something that evolved to hunt pack prey on a high-gravity world. Your armor means nothing to those claws. Stay quiet." Through the security feed on her datapad, Florence watched the adult Qualith prowl past a camera. It was massive, easily twice the size of the kid, scales darker and more angular, built for killing, refined by millions of years of evolution. And it was between her and everyone who needed help. Florence reached Corridor Junction 8, 3 sections away from the guest quarters. Through the walls, she could hear it. The scrape of claws on metal, the low rumble of hunting vocalizations. She pulled up the habitat controls on her datapad. The kid's enclosure, still sealed, still secure. But she could see the juvenile pacing, agitated. It could sense the adult nearby, chemical signals, maybe subsonic calls. The kid knew something was wrong. An idea formed. Terrible idea. Absolutely terrible. But it was the only one she had. "Ulix, I need you to trust me." Those words never precede good decisions. "I'm going to open the kid's habitat." Silence. Then, "You have lost your mind. The small predator and the large predator will both be loose. This is the opposite of solving the problem. The adult is hunting, but the kid—" Florence watched the juvenile's behavior on the security feed. The pacing pattern, the agitated scales, the contact calls. The kid is calling for its parent. Another pause. Longer this time. "Oh," Ulix said quietly. "Oh no. You're going to use the juvenile as bait." "I'm going to reunite a family," Florence corrected, "and guide them both back into containment. By putting yourself between them." "Yes. This is the worst plan I have ever heard." "Got a better one?" No response. Florence took a breath. Checked the corridor. Clear for now. "Open the kid's habitat. And, Ulix, if this goes wrong, make sure my personnel file notes that I was doing my job. If this goes wrong, I will be too busy having complete systemic collapse to worry about paperwork." The kid's habitat door cycled open with a hiss that sounded way too loud in the emergency-lit corridor. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the kid emerged, cautious, scales shimmering with uncertainty. It saw Florence and immediately chirped. That same contact call, that "Are you here?" sound. Florence chirped back. The kid bounded over, pressing against her legs like an oversized cat, seeking reassurance, seeking safety. "Good kid," Florence whispered. "Now, let's go find your parent before someone gets hurt." She started walking toward Corridor Junction 12, and the kid followed. Behind them, somewhere in the ventilation system, the adult Qualeth screamed, a sound that echoed through the station like a promise of violence. The kid answered, its juvenile call piercing the air, and from the guest quarters, Falnix's voice came through the comm. Florence, it stopped circling. It's listening. I know, Florence said. That's the point. She turned the corner into Junction 12. The adult Qualeth stood at the far end, backlit by emergency lights, every scale and claw designed for one purpose. It saw Florence. It saw the kid. And it moved. The adult Qualeth moved like liquid death, closing the distance between them in heartbeats. Florence's entire body screamed at her to run, every primate instinct howling that this was a predator, and she was very much prey. She stood her ground. The kid chirped again, louder this time, and darted forward, not attacking, but positioning itself between Florence and the adult. The juvenile's scales flickered with colors Florence had never seen before, patterns that the behavioral database hadn't documented. Communication. The kid was communicating with its parent. The adult slowed, head lowering, those glowing eyes fixed on the juvenile. A rumble came from deep in its chest, subsonic frequencies that Florence felt more than heard. The kid responded, scales still flickering, and then did something that made Florence's heart stop. It looked back at her, then at its parent, then back at Florence, introducing them. "Oh, you brilliant little thing," Florence whispered. The adult's attention shifted fully to Florence now, but the hunting tension had changed. It was still wary, still dangerous, but no longer in kill mode. It was assessing. "Alex," Florence said quietly into her comm, "I need you to open the main habitat enclosure. The new one we built last month? The big one? The one designed for family groups? That's the one. Florence, that's on the other side of the station. Then I guess we're taking a walk." What followed was the longest, most terrifying trek of Florence's life. She walked slowly, deliberately, with the kid at her side, and the adult Qualeth pacing behind them like a particularly deadly shadow. Every step felt like tempting fate, but the kid kept chittering, kept those scales flickering, kept its parent calm. They passed the guest quarters. Falnix's door opened a crack, and Florence caught a glimpse of his face, no longer cocky, no longer looking for a fight, just watching with something that might have been awe. "Follow at a distance," Florence said. "Might need your help with the doors." To her surprise, Falnix nodded and slipped out, moving with a hunter's silence, keeping back, staying non-threatening. Smart. They reached the archives. Kumanth's voice came through the comm, shaky but present. "Florence, we can see you on the security feeds. What you're doing is insane," Florence offered. "I was going to say unprecedented." The new habitat loomed ahead, its entrance already cycling open. Florence could see inside, spacious, enriched, designed for multiple Qualeth, with room to establish territory but also interact. Everything the old enclosures weren't. The kid bounded forward, eager, and disappeared inside. The adult paused at the entrance, looking at Florence one last time. She held its gaze. No dominance, no submission. Just acknowledgement. The adult turned and followed its offspring inside. Florence hit the door controls, and the habitat sealed with a hiss of pressurizing locks. Her legs gave out. She sat down hard on the corridor floor, shaking with adrenaline crash. Falnix approached slowly, then sat down beside her. "I came here to test myself against a human warrior," he said quietly. "I see now that human strength is not what I thought. I'm not a warrior. No, you are something else, something my people have no word for." He gestured at the habitat, where the kid and adult were already interacting, the juvenile showing its parent the enrichment toys. "You understand what others only fear. This is greater than warrior strength. The comm crackled. Ulix's voice, steadier now. "Florence, Kumanth wishes to speak with you." The bureaucrat's face appeared on a wall monitor, and for once, he didn't look like he'd swallowed something sour. "I came here to evaluate human safety protocols, to determine if humans represented a risk to galactic xenobiological programs." "And?" Florence asked, too tired to care about politics. "My report will recommend that humans be given priority consideration for predator research positions. Not because you can dominate these creatures, but because you understand that they shouldn't need to be dominated." He paused. "Also, I will be recommending significant redesign of our containment facilities. Those habitats were inadequate." Florence looked through the viewing window. The adult had settled on a raised platform, the kid curled against its side. Both of them, finally, actually relaxed. "They're not specimens," Florence said. "They're living beings who deserve proper care. If we're going to study them, we owe them that much." "Agreed," Kumanth said, and he actually sounded like he meant it. Over the next few weeks, the station transformed. New protocols, better habitats, enrichment programs that actually considered the psychological needs of predators. The Galactic Council sent more staff, including 2 other humans, which made Florence's life significantly easier. The kid thrived in the family habitat, learning from its parent but still occasionally pressing against the viewing window when Florence passed by. Still wanting that contact, that connection. Florence always chirped back. Falnix stayed on the station, claiming he wanted to learn human observation techniques. Really, Florence suspected, he just liked watching the predators and didn't want to admit it. "You know," he said one day, watching the kid play, "my people teach that strength is everything, but you showed me different strength, understanding strength." "It's not strength," Florence said. "It's just paying attention, caring enough to look past the teeth and claws and see the actual creature." A new transport arrived that afternoon, and Florence went to check the manifest. Another specimen, something called a Vulketh, described in the database as extremely dangerous, approach with caution, hostile to most life forms. She pulled up the biological data. Herbivore, herd species, aggressive only when threatened. Florence sighed, looking at the terrified creature in the transport container. Another misunderstood being, labeled dangerous, because it looked scary. "All right," she said, pulling up the habitat assignments. "Let's get you somewhere comfortable." Behind her, Wim chittered with laughter. "Florence, making friends with another deadly predator that is actually just scared herbivore. This is becoming pattern." "Someone has to do it," Florence said. And really, she thought, watching the Vulketh settle into its new habitat, that's what humans did best. Not dominating, not conquering, just understanding, just caring enough to try. Somewhere in the family habitat, the kid chirped, and its parent rumbled a response. Florence smiled. "Best job in the galaxy."